All right, welcome back, everyone, to Cyber for Hire, the Managed Security Podcast. Once again, I'm Bradley Barth with Cyber Risk Alliance. In the first half of our show, we talked with Christopher Fielder at Arctic Wolf about leveling up your SecOps program. But right now, I'd like to welcome back my co-host for the day, Bill Brenner, because it's time for us to examine our Managed Services InfoSec topic of the week, presenting our big idea in security, endpoint security, entering the era of AI and XDR. Endpoints are everywhere and come in many forms, and especially in today's BYOD environment, it's becoming increasingly difficult to maintain visibility and control over all of them. Unfortunately, rogue endpoints represent an enticing attack vector for adversaries who are always looking for a way inside your network. But according to an August 2023 Cybersecurity Buyer Intelligence survey of 200 security and IT leaders and executives, security professionals are actively working to address such threats with a mix of MFA, strong password policies, and training. And they're hopeful that newer, more advanced tools like AI and XDR can help minimize endpoint compromises. This session will analyze this and other key findings from CRA's endpoint security research and what the results mean from an MSP perspective. Bill, glad you're back with me. And as always, we're going to jump right into things. So let's start by having you paint a picture for us based on the responses from this survey about how serious of an issue this is in terms of overall endpoint sprawl and why it is important to be constantly building out your solution stack to protect these endpoints.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about this research is you have to squint to see it, but you start to see a shift in focus for a lot of our respondents. So what I mean by that is for years now, the central piece of an endpoint strategy has been we need to protect the end users from themselves. They cannot be trusted or relied upon to, not fall for every hook that's out there. And what we see in this particular survey is security professionals moving on from, that's still very much the case, but this report focuses more on the what to do about it. And what's interesting here is the priorities as a lot of these respondents are going into 2024. So, for example, artificial intelligence and machine learning is the most planned for 2024 endpoint security investment. That's followed by things like XDR. And what you see here is respondents are moving beyond the basic EDR and reactionary tools. So they're trying to get ahead of threats by using technology that raises contextual awareness. So XDR is a great example of that and anticipates threats much more quickly, which obviously that's where AI comes in. And in our last segment, Chris had mentioned this, where AI, it's a tool, not the be-all, end-all, but this puts into clearer focus with something like endpoint security, where AI is seen as the tool. Some other things that were interesting to me was certainly not surprising, but it just stood out as an ongoing highlight, where 3 out of 5 respondents admitted that they've had to deal with one or more compromised endpoints in the last year. So that's not a sky is falling kind of thing. It's been there, but when you consider that 63% of respondents reported having 1,000 or more endpoints on their network, that translates into a lot of compromise. And it shows how difficult it is to stay ahead of the threats that come via the endpoints.
Yeah.
So
No, that makes a lot of sense, and is very a very clear indicator of that sprawl to which I was referring. And yes, the increasing adoption rates that we'll see moving into 2024 and beyond of AI and XDR does seem to indicate an interest in having more of that contextual intelligence for endpoint security. Also, in the interim, while AI and XDR seems to be the future focus, I know there was also a question about currently which endpoint security practices are most commonly implemented. Can you share with us a little bit about what are some of the most common technologies right now that are currently being implemented, and maybe a couple that might be surprising that are less of a focus? Maybe that's an area where MSPs and MSSPs can step in if those particular projects aren't taking place on an in-house basis.
So there's one good example to look at. If you're an MSSP or an MSSP and you're doing business with security vendors in the channel, you know that Sophos is an example of a company that's been heavily active with that, as is Arctic Wolf. And what you see in those areas is a lot of discussion around MDR, managed detection and response, as a way to deal with a lot of things, but certainly endpoint is one of them. And I think what you see here is everybody is looking for this unified source of data that they can then see. I hate to say things like single pane of glass. Everybody says that, but it is true. It's where can we see everything on one screen and get the context, get where our priorities need to be in responding. And so you see that at play big time here.
Yeah, for sure. And I know another focus of the research was asking some of the security professionals some of the top challenges in implementing endpoint security. So, what are some of the biggest barriers that you found there are currently to overcome for these implementations to become more successful?
So nothing particularly new here. And I mentioned it at the beginning. It's the end users. The idea that you cannot possibly get all end users, most end users for that reason, to do all the things they need to not fall victim to things that compromise their endpoint, that compromise their device. Not because people are stupid or they don't care. It's just when you're using multiple devices every day to do all of your work, you're focusing on that work. And you're not thinking all day long about, I shouldn't do this or I should do this because this could compromise my endpoint. You're working. And so it's what can MSPs do to take that responsibility out of the hands of the users. You still need to educate. You still need to raise awareness. You still need to get as many end users as possible to do the right things and make the right decisions. But at the same time, it wouldn't be fair to put the full burden on the user who's just trying to get through life every day. And I think that is where MSPs can really make a difference. And I think the way they can make the difference is through the use of, XDR, MDR, tools like that bring the picture together into better focus.
So before we wrap up this segment, Bill, I know that the report did have some final recommendations for readers. Can you summarize a couple of the key ones for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big one, and I'm at risk of sounding like a broken record, is you need, we've, s- we've spent years collectively as a community buying a lot of products to try and deal with every threat that comes zipping around the corner. But context is key. And so it's important to be looking at what you can do for your customers through use of AI and machine learning. If you're not using something in the realm of XDR or MDR, my personal opinion is you probably ought to be. Not probably, you ought to be. So that's, but that's pretty much a reflection of the takeaways in the report.
Excellent. Well, great. So, yeah, for anybody that's interested, Bill, just real quick, you want to just let folks know where they can get their hands on this report?
Yep. So you can get your hands on the report by going to SC Media, where all of these reports are kept. And also, you could visit the Cyber Risk Alliance website, where if you go under resources, you will see that we have a press release and link to the report landing pages for all of these.
All right, so be sure to do that and check that out and read that report for additional insights and perspectives on endpoint security. And with that, we've reached our endpoint. We are officially out of time, but I'd like to once more thank Bill Brenner for joining me as my guest co-host today. Meanwhile, to everyone else watching, feel free to check out even more cybersecurity podcast content on the MSSP Alert, Channel E2E, and SC Media websites. Until next time, I'm Bradley Barth. Please reach out to us via our show page with your comments, questions, and insights about the business of cybersecurity. We'll keep the conversation going on the next episode of Cyber for Hire, your insight source for cyber outsourcing.